Okay. Next presenter is actually zooming in from Hong Kong. Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, everyone.
Sarah, because I'm going to take a photo. Wave, come on. That's it. Come on. I'm going to send these photos to you via WhatsApp so you can actually see the audience. How's that?
Well, it would be much better if I was actually there with you all.
Absolutely. This, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now to present Sarah. She is the Group Head of Media Partnerships APAC from TripAdvisor, zooming in from Hong Kong. Please, Sarah Mathews. Thank you. Big round of applause. Can you hear that? Can you hear the claps?
Yeah! I am crazy jealous that I'm not there with you guys, but good news. I have managed to find one of the last rooms at the end of May in Hong Kong for a quarantine. So I am in fact flying to Australia. So I'll be there early May. And hopefully we'll be having loads of coffee, avocado toast, because I want to make sure that I'm feeling young and hip, and spending time with everyone in the travel industry. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be sharing some of the latest trends. I realize that I am throwing a bunch of data at you prior to lunch. So hopefully I won't be taking up too much of your time, but giving you some ideas of what we're seeing from the consumers around the world, a little bit of trends, insight that we're seeing for Australia, and giving you guys some information to chat through during your lunch breaks. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this all works. Joys of technology and doing everything virtual. Okay, hopefully the AV team will be happy with what I've done. So let's look ahead at what we're seeing in 2022, and already, you know, things have changed. We're in April, and you know, a number of things have already impacted travel. We're seeing what's happening out in Ukraine, but we've been running surveys for every quarter since April of 2020, and really consistently asking, what are consumers planning to do? What are they most concerned about? What are they most excited about? And so we looked at our numbers from 2019 and then again in 2020, and we looked at travel intent. Now, I was listening previously to the previous panel, and I agree. Like Asia Pacific as a whole group, we've been more conservative in our border controls and management. And so in order to grow that consumer confidence, we need a little bit more time to ensure that we're sharing all of the border restrictions have lifted in Australia, making sure that messaging is going out, actually having a lot of travelers coming back and sharing those reviews will really encourage other travelers. And so it is that confidence, right? I'm, you know, also planning my trip, and I don't think I've ever spent this long just trying to get paperwork together for a trip, and I'm only flying to Singapore and Australia. So there is a lot more management. But the good news is when we surveyed audience in Singapore, Japan, Australia, US, and UK, every market spoke about their travel intent is higher than in comparison to 2019. I love the phrase revenge travel. I'm already also planning my second trip, and luckily Hong Kong has just decreased their quarantine requirements to 7 days. I never thought I would survive any number of days in quarantine. I thought I'd be like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. But I'm happy to do 7 days. Like I'm so desperate to travel. I will do my 7 days, and I'll do it a couple of times this year just so I can get my travel back on. So it's great to see that we are seeing these markets looking to travel more in 2022. We also looked at what was up specifically when we break this out into groups, and we can see that business travel is out of those 5 markets, they're a key travel priority. And so we see that that is growing. And it's interesting because we know people are desperate to go out. Yes, we talk a lot about work flexibility. It's proven that, you know, working virtually does work. but ultimately it doesn't stop. That face to face is still so critical, and being able to fly and meet with your clients or your contacts or even your own teams means so much. So we do see business travel coming up. And so what we see is a 33% increase 2022 versus 2019. We still see domestic is up. And when we look at domestic business travel, it's up by 2019 versus 2022. So domestic is still going to play a part, whether it's business travel or leisure. And again, it goes towards that concern about, am I ready for a long haul? What does that look like? And I think a lot of people have really enjoyed rediscovering their backyard. And so they'll continue to take that domestic trip. We also wanted to look at this broken up by age. And the 18s to the 34, in general, nearly every aspect, they are looking at an increased intent of travel, whether it's a business trip, visiting friends or relatives, travel domestically for leisure, travel domestically to visit friends and family, travel abroad for leisure. This is all up. Whereas if you look at the older age group, 55 to 75, there are more concerns. So you can see, for example, of that age group, less likely to travel for a business trip. You can see that there is a nice chunk of that going towards traveling domestically for leisure, and then likely to travel domestically for friends and relatives. Now, again, that's going to be, you need to look at sort of vaccination rates amongst the elderly. I live in Hong Kong. It's a major concern of ours right now because a lot of our elderly are not vaccinated. And so there's a natural correlation to vaccination rates and the desire to travel as well. What was really exciting as well is that we see that travel is back and bigger than ever, and 25% of our respondents are willing to take more trips this year than they did pre-pandemic. And again, it goes back to that revenge travel, right? People are looking to travel more. They need that break. And I think for all of us in the travel industry, something we've known for years is that travel not only has all of the amazing, joyful memories and moments, but it's so important to your physical and mental well-being. And I think we've all felt that, we talk about the great resignation. A lot of that comes down to burnout and shift in mentality. And I think part of that is driven by the fact that people have not been able to travel. And when you travel, you take a break. You have a proper break. I live in Hong Kong, as mentioned. My domestic travel is either 5 minutes this way or 5 minutes that way. And I did do a lot of staycations, but it just wasn't the same as being able to get out of the city. So what are consumers looking for? So this is hopefully useful to all of you in terms of understanding the types of experiences and behavior that consumers are looking for. So 40% are considering to go to places they've never been to. They're looking to do, 40% are looking to do this more than they did in 2019. So going to lesser known or off the beaten track is really, really popular. Going somewhere very different to where they currently live. So that's a really good way of also looking at when you're targeting that audience is how do you showcase that to them? Wanting to immerse themselves in authentic local experiences. And again, it's 33% more than they did in 2019. So that desire to do something different, we're going to talk a little bit about that need for immersion and experiences is critical. What we also see is that desire, we heard about this in the previous panel, was the need for wellness and relaxation. And we see that there are more people wanting to go to do nothing versus packing in as many activities as possible. And there are so many ways of doing that. Even cities I know is sort of struggling right now, but there are ways of thinking about how do you bring that consumer back into, all of the amazing cities in Australia, getting them to do more wellness experiences, whether it's understanding the local parks, what can they do nearby? Are there really, are there nice yoga classes nearby? I mean, it's a start to get people into that space, but also thinking about how cities are a great hub for that drive out where they can go for 2 days and then come back into the city as well. Splurging, this is great news for all of us. 28% are planning to splurge more than they did in 2019, which is really good. 44%, 18 to 24-year-olds are willing to spend more, which is great news. And the blokes in the survey I feel that it's more important to splurge compared with 24% of the female respondents. But the desire to spend more to get what they really want to achieve on that trip is very, very important. So again, thinking about the desire to splurge. Now, there is also the balance of that. So the splurge is there, but they also want to make sure that they're still getting value for their trip. So, nothing major here. I mean, it's always been very much part of travel, which is the experience part. But what we're seeing is that some of these have really grown during this pandemic, which is exploring food and drink offerings in a destination. Australia has a wealth and abundance of amazing food and, all of your different offerings in different cities and states. Again, it's really critical to bring that to the forefront. Visiting local landmarks, cultural attractions, attending traditional arts and cultural events, and instructional activities, cooking classes, sailing lessons, skiing seasons coming up. So all of that opportunity to really get more involved and more immersed in those experiences. So it's less about being on a bus and just hitting a number of spots. 60% considering learning about a history and culture of the place they're visiting really important. 55 considering visiting attraction and specific events important. And 30% consider enjoying the nightlife important. So we are seeing nightlife coming back out. People do want to be able to go out in the evenings and do something fabulous. Events, it's slow, but there is that interest and people do want to attend events. So thinking about big events that are coming to Australia, how can you make sure that you're getting that audience to use that as a hook to also spend longer and stay longer? Not a huge amount of difference here. The biggest one, though, is traditionally we see beach trips being at the top, but we see visiting friends and relatives at the top right now. So that need to connect is so critical. What's interesting as well is we've seen travelers really look at planning family trips together. So it's not necessarily visiting friends and family, but it's about coming together. So if you've got, someone living in the US and someone living in the UK, is it an opportunity to bring them to Australia to have a family trip? So they're meeting, but also meeting in a new location. We do see indoor experiences making a comeback. What we see is that majority are willing to visit indoor attractions such as museums. Dining indoors is back. We're seeing that in a huge amount as well. And older respondents are likely to attend indoor events and visiting indoor attractions. So again, it's that younger and older demographic deciding sort of what's really going to work for them. We also see attending business conferences. Adrian was saying that you guys are packed there today, which is really exciting. I'm so jealous to not be able to be there and have a face-to-face. But we do see that they are, moving towards going back into events. Using public transportation, that's also been a concern for a lot of users about, well, what does that mean for me? Now, the other thing I will say here, it's really important when we think about that global audience that we're going to go through a middle period of folks adapting. China is a key source market for many countries, including Australia. They're not coming back anytime soon. They're still under very strict regulations. They're probably not going to be opening until the latter part of this year. And even when they do, think about the way they'd be living. Someone like myself in Hong Kong, when I'm in Australia, I'm going to be masked up to the nines. I'm probably not going to come in full PPE gear, but I'm going to be masked up. And the reason is because my return trip, when I'm back home, I cannot afford to be infected, because if I am, I have to go into government quarantine. So there will be different considerations. Whereas if you look at someone coming from Europe, they're probably very comfortable not having those concerns that someone in Japan or China has been living under very different conditions in the last 2 years. So there's a bit of a balancing act for the industry to manage in this sort of midterm. What do we see them wanting to do? Outdoors is still really, really key. Camping, hiking, trekking, kayaking, anything to do with outdoors. So being able to link those experiences up is really, really powerful. Making sure that you're putting together ideas that they can do, even if it's in a city or outside, like how can you get them to think about outdoor activities as well as relaxing? So that's a really big focus that we see a lot of consumers when they're searching, they are searching for that outdoor activity. COVID is still a concern. We are seeing really big increases in international travel intent, and domestic travel remains important. We do still see a lot of folks saying they want to stay in their country rather than going abroad. Particularly when we look at the numbers for Asia Pacific, we see that Europe is really fueling a lot of APAC's recovery, as well as interregionally. US, that outbound is strong, but it's going very much within region. So a lot of the Caribbean, Mexico, they're spending a lot of time there, looking more towards Europe, and we're starting to see that change. Part of that is just, making sure we're building back that market share, making sure that we're building up that consumer confidence. We also need to see routes coming back. That's also going to be a big challenge in getting people to fly. Again, my own experiences, I can't get a direct flight back from Sydney to Hong Kong because there are no flights. I have to fly back through Singapore in order to get back to Hong Kong. So there'll be an adjustment period as we start to see travel regrow, routes coming back. Then we're going to see more and more travelers willing to go internationally. Other than cost, most of what we're seeing is the concern about COVID restrictions. Now, this is not specific to Australia, but this is really in general the sentiment from all of those 5 markets looking at globally. So what people want is clarity. One of our filters on TripAdvisor that's most used right now is our safety travel feature. So travelers are looking at whether I'm going to a restaurant or a hotel or an experience. What do I need to prepare? What do I need to bring? Will I need to have a vaccination record ready? In what format will I need that for? Again, because each country has so many different restrictions, it's going to be very important that Australia continues, and I agree with the previous panel, working together to make sure it's a single source of truth, that information is going out consistently to the consumer, and that it's very, very clear. So what is helping them make that decision to travel? Well, they want to go to a destination that has low COVID cases. They don't need to self-isolate. They also don't need to self-isolate when returning home. That the people they're traveling with are vaccinated. The destination has a high vaccination rate. No restrictions imposed on kids' vaccination. The destination has a vaccine policy. Do they have mask mandates? Do I need my child to be vaccinated at the time we try? Do I need to hopefully not to need to take a PCR test when arriving at the destination? So these are still sort of some of the concerns that consumers are thinking about when they're trying to decide on a destination. In terms of accommodation shifts, pleased to see that hotels are still up there. It's not a massive shift from 2019 to 2022. Most travelers are still looking to stay at hotels, staying with friends and family. Vacation rentals is on the up. Campsite campgrounds are on the up. B&B is on the up. RVs as well. Hostels as well. So, but it's, majority are still looking to stay at hotels. And for a lot of reasons, it's the convenience. It's about knowing the safety protocols that hotels are doing. The flex, I think, we talked a lot about flexibility. That's going to remain a priority. And I'm sharing this. This is exactly what we're talking a little bit about, which is the safety and cleanliness, but also that need for flexibility. So as you see, because we looked at a number of countries in that group, Singapore, Japan's in that group, you can still see that there'll be travelers who are looking to wear a mask, even after COVID restrictions are lifted. I'd like to see safety measures in place at hospitality businesses, even after COVID cases dropped worldwide. So little things like, do I need to track and trace when I'm in Australia? When I'm signing in to a hotel, has the pen, I've seen, for example, some hotels have a UV light, just drop the pen back into that UV light box, and then the next traveler can sign in. Cleanliness, what is the business doing in terms of showcasing cleanliness is going to be very, very important as well. And as I mentioned, flexibility and protection. So 62% think flexible cancellation policies are more important than they were in 2019. 51% think that taking the time to plan trips is more important than it was in 2019. Excuse me, and 44% think having travel insurance is more important than 2019. Flexible cancellation is a must. We see that time and time again, and it's across every category within the travel space. So being able to have that flexible changes in their flights. And that's a lot of reasons why we're seeing travelers, for example, booking their flights direct with airlines because they want to be able to make that change really quickly. Taking time to plan. Now, this is an interesting one because when we look at the look to book, there's a lot of pre-planning going on. So getting to that booking stage has actually been elongated. And part of that is because they really need to understand, hey, if I'm traveling with kids, what do I need to prepare? Is it worth us preparing and planning to go if I need to do X, Y, and Z? So I know I've only got a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to show you some of the latest global trends. So this is the fastest growing markets globally. And we can see global IPs looking at Ireland has grown, UK, Norway, Denmark, Argentina, the Netherlands, Lithuania, Iceland, Poland, and Germany. That's all in January this year versus December. And out of Asia Pacific, so this is Asia Pacific travelers looking at Australia, Newcastle, Cook Islands, New Zealand, Fiji, French Polynesia, Japan, Thailand, South Korea, and Cambodia. So you can see really the South Pacific is dominating the search on TripAdvisor in January this year. What we also see is there's been a nice pickup. So since Australia opened up their borders, we can see that international UUs, unique users, looking at Australian content on TripAdvisor has grown. So if we look at just March versus February of this year, just between the 2 months, we've seen a 22% increase of traffic looking at Australian content. So that's really positive news. We hope to continue to see that growing over the year, getting more internationals back to Australia. No major changes here in terms of source market. The only difference is that in 2019, the number one source market on TripAdvisor looking at Australia was India. In 2022 of March this year, it's US, UK, then India. Singapore's moved up as well. New Zealand's there, Canada, Germany, France, Japan, and Italy as well. So those are slight changes from where 2019, there were different markets. You had China in there as well, Malaysia in there. Japan was further up. Japan's of course, these are all due to border controls within those own destinations. And then top cities viewed in Australia, again, January versus March. So Melbourne was the number one searched in January. It's Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. In February, Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne. Cairns was up there in February. Adelaide's up now in March. Gold Coast in March. Canberra, Darwin, Hobart, Perth. Not a huge amount of changes, just a little shift here and there in terms of destinations being searched on TripAdvisor. And for Australia, by international travelers, so we did not look at domestic, but outdoor activities and nature and parks, including sites and landmarks, take up 41% of total attraction traffic share. So we do see indoors is not doing as well as outdoors. So, but this is viewed by international travelers. So again, making sure that when you're preparing suggestions, itineraries, you're really focusing on what they can do nearby and regionally. And then how has this changed in 2019 versus 2020? Actually, not a huge amount. The only difference is that outdoors and nature grew from 17.4%. It's now at 32%. Food and drink was at 49% pre-pandemic. It's now at 15.3%. So bringing those back to the forefront, I think is going to be really, really important. And actually thinking about, you know, if I'm staying in a beautiful hotel in Sydney, can I get a picnic basket and do something really cool on Bondi? Or go to one of the the national parks nearby, but can I pick up a picnic basket? So things that make it easier for me to experience that outdoor. It was a lot of data to rush through. But, you know, one of the things I'll say is data is crisis proof. And if we've learned anything during this pandemic, it's really important to look at data and insights. We can't rely on trend data. Seasonality is out of the window. It's really about understanding how those government controls plus the consumer concerns and behavior, and then having to readjust how we approach that consumer experience. Ultimately, Australia has so much to offer. It is a long-haul destination. It's where people dream of going. So the key thing in 2022 and beyond is regaining your original market share, getting travelers to feel confident about traveling, getting them to stay longer, which we've seen already. There is that desire to stay longer, but showcasing that mix and match of things that they know and things that perhaps they don't know, and getting them to discover more of Australia. With that, I thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy your lunch. Bon appetit.
Thank you,
and
Sarah.
I look forward to seeing you all in Sydney.